This weekend, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon finally arrives after much anticipation to some divisive reactions, to say the least. Today, we're going to be talking all about the film, about its production, about the journey to it, about the reactions, about our thoughts on it, our spoiler thoughts, our favourite moments, as much as we can in as much time as we have. But I am not alone today. I am joined with Rakib, who is over here. How are we?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to
Brilliant.
meet you, Tom.
Brilliant.
Finally.
We're excited, aren't we?
Yeah, we're excited.
We enjoyed the film, right?
I love the film.
There we go. What did you think of it? Non-spoiler thoughts. Go.
I thought it was an action-packed, intergalactic sci-fi epic. Loved it. Visceral and triumphant with the music as well.
Do you know what? I agree. I think in my sort of social reaction for the film, I mentioned that it is a fairly nice and... first off, I think the film is quite accessible. Whether you're a Snyder fan, whether you're not a Snyder fan, no matter what you think of the director, I think it is accessible. Whether you like it, different story.
Yeah.
But just my general thoughts on it is that it is sort of how you described it. It's this triumphant intergalactic adventure with some of my favourite Zack Snyder moments to date, and maybe my favourite Snyder third act out of quite a few of his films, because I think once the third act kicks off, it's riveting, it's badass, kick-ass, and it's pretty glorious. So
100%.
Overall, it's not a perfect film. I think we both agree on that.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Clear problems, and the director's cut that's coming in summer 2024 definitely hinders this version of the movie. But that's not me saying you shouldn't check out this version, because you should. Again, I did
100%.
enjoy it. So overall, I honestly really dug it. Even if this is the 2-hour more streamlined cut, I think the characters, while they were definitely just introductions, some of them I really fell for. Jimmy, Cora, those types.
For me, Admiral Atticus. He's my
Admiral,
favorite.
of course. Noble is
100%.
Really quick to talk about Noble. I think Ed Skrein, I definitely mispronounced his name. I think he gives one of the best villain performances we've seen all year round, and I'm not going to elaborate on that until a little later on.
Yeah.
But it's fair to say we both pretty much really enjoyed the film.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a
for
fun
this
film.
version. It was.
Yeah.
Where do you rank it in your sort of Snyder catalogue? Is it near the bottom of the list? Is it near the top? Is it in the middle? Where is it?
I'd say it's a top 5 Snyder film, to be honest. So
I respect it.
Man of Steel, Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Of course.
Then for me, it'd have to be Watchmen. I'd put Rebel Moon there.
Okay.
And then 5th, Batman v Superman.
I respect it. I respect it. I don't agree with all of it, but for Rebel Moon, for me, I do agree with... When I came out of the premiere for Rebel Moon, I thought... This is a top 3 Snyder picture.
Oh, sick.
Behind Man of Steel and Justice League, but a top 3.
100%.
Since then, I've sort of settled more on my thoughts, and I don't think it's a top 3, but I do still think it's a top 5, which is some... I mean, that's still high praise from me. So I'd put it at number 5. We'd have Rebel Moon Part 1. Number 4, we'd have The Owls of Gaul, Legend of the Guardians. Checked it out a few weeks ago. Really dug it. Really dug it, especially once it got its wings and it flew. It hit the ground running, and it was great. Number 3, I will go with Dawn of the Dead. It was a remake, for sure, of George A. Romero's, but it had Snyder's style all over it, and while he's definitely improved since then in a lot of aspects, it's still one of his best, I think, to date. Second place, we'd have Justice League. It's the encapsulation of his journey at DC, his filmmaking journey as a whole, and sort of his development in the media and with fans. And then number 1, the gold standard for comic book movies, for any movie ever, because it is my favourite movie of all time. And if you tell me to watch more movies, that's fine. I'm not going to change my mind because of that. We'd obviously have Man of Steel.
100%. Masterpiece.
So, Man of Steel's great. Yeah. We love Man of Steel. But for Rebel Moon to just get into the top 5 and sit comfortably upon just greatness, really, I think that is saying something. Again, even if this is the flawed cut, but we'll talk more about that later. We're just going to focus on what we really liked about the movie. So, hit me. In spoiler details, by the way, so if you've not yet seen the film, of course, leave and come back, and you can join in the topic and conversation with us. But again, this is your spoiler warning and your final spoiler warning. Let's get in to Rebel Moon. Favorite part of the movie? Spoilers.
Favorite
hit
part
me.
of the movie. So for me, it was honestly the second act of the film.
You enjoyed the second act?
Exactly. Like after watching the film, a lot of people were saying to me that they didn't enjoy the second act.
Yeah.
But conversely, I really enjoyed it because after a slower first act compared to Snyder's regular films, it's as soon as the action kicked in, that's where I felt elevated the film, and it was just the part where Korra was pretty much trying to organize the whole army to take on
together,
Admiral Atticus. That's the part where I was like, that's it, because the score kicked in, the action,
it all
there's
just
so
hit the
much
fan.
so much slow motion action. I loved it, and we saw a bit more of Korra's backstory as well in the second act.
Yeah,
which I felt helped elevate the film.
It helped establish her as a hero to root for as well.
Establish her as sort of like this mysterious character sent from the mother world, and that's what. Yeah, it was just a favorite part for me.
Okay, I don't agree. My favorite
agree?
part is firmly the third act.
Yeah.
But I'll talk the specific point where I was like, oh, I'm all in just a second. I actually thought the first act was great. I thought the minute the mothership, the ship turned up on Velt, which is the farming planet, and Korra ran to bash the bell and warn everyone. I thought, oh, we're getting started, and I think the film honored that, because I do think that's the point, almost maybe 15-20 minutes in, where we just got into it and we just went, and then we got the introduction to Noble, played by Ed. Again, villain performance of the year, or at least one of them. And how they set him up, huh?
Oscar nomination.
I mean, I don't know if I go that far. But I thought he was great, and the setup for him was fantastic, especially come the third act. But talking of the third act, the minute I knew, oh shit, Korra is a badass, is when Gunnar frees them from the weird crab machine claws that they're sort of hooked into.
Stuck to their necks.
Yeah, and she does this slow motion slide, grabs the gun, and she whips her hair and turns around. It's in the trailer. I was like, shit's about to go down. She's about to kick ass. I'm in love with this universe. And I'm ready for what's about to happen. And then the fight ensued. And then we had the 1v1 with Noble and Korra on the
tower,
on the little tower.
Insane.
Tower. That was crazy. And the fact Noble died, right? I mean, he died. He sort of did die, and then he came back. When he came back, I was like, I mean, earlier on in the film, I said to my friend who was watching with me, I said, I think he's a clone. And then when he sort of was a clone, or was sort of, I don't know if they cloned him or if they sort of just pumped his body back up. But when that happened, I was like, oh shoot, this world has a lot more mythology than we even were giving it credit for at the start. Because at the start, we see all these aliens, a lot of different type of aliens. We go to these different planets, we see the different sort of infrastructures of each world and the weaponry and stuff. But when they brought in him seeing what I presume is his dad or his father in that sort of dream reality, whatever it was, we'll find out in part 2. Because remember, this is a part 1. I was like, okay, Zack is really throwing everything he can, every bit of mythology. He's literally creating his own universe, and he's writing just all the coolest science fiction things into it. So I really liked Act 1. I really liked Act 3, and I did like Act 2, especially with the Korra, the little backstory with her in the snow. We get a lot of glimpses of that in the trailer. Looked great, by the way.
I do agree with you on Act 3. I think the good thing that makes Act 3 amazing is the fact that Korra's backstory is actually linked to Admiral Atticus. Because with Korra's backstory, she's brought up by this lord and king. And then we see towards the end how he's linked to Admiral. It's like that full circle sort of thing. And it teases you towards part 2.
Yeah,
which I really enjoyed.
I think part 2 is going to fully dive into that. But we'll talk more part 2 wishes a little later on. But But as for some of my favorite moments of the film, I think it is the ones I've mentioned: Cora ringing the bell, signaling everyone. The Nemesis vs Armada fight.
Oh, incredible!
Great.
The spider
CG,
scene, insane.
$83 million. I think that's the budget.
Crazy.
$83 million.
That was one of my favorites as well. Like,
have you
the sword fight?
It was
insane.
clean. You could see everything. It was awesome. Like, genuinely great. And the CG again, $83 million. This movie looked absolutely fantastic for it, especially when you compare it to some. And I won't name names, but I'm sure we can all think of some like 300 million superhero films that came out last year. That looked atrocious in comparison. I think it reinforces the idea that, not the idea, I think it's proof. Hollywood definitely has a budget problem. Because if Zack can do this for this amount of money, and Gareth Edwards for a similar amount of money with the creator, and there's been a few other little projects like Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, that was about 100 million.
Yeah, that was about 100 mil.
I think there's no need for these movies to cost 300 million. I think it's a waste. Why use 300 on one film when Zack's and others have proved that you can do pretty much the same, but like fraction of the cost. But yeah, it looked great, and the fight was awesome. Another fight that I did really enjoy again is where sort of all the rebels break out of those cages. They all go after each other. And I think we should talk about a character who he gets a really great moment. It's in the trailer. It's Ray Fisher, where he runs up the platform, jumps up the spear, and he stabs it. And it's like, I thought that was it. And then he gets shot like 3, 4, 5 times in slow motion to, sink it in more. And I think he is dead. And that's unfortunate because he had like 5 minutes screen time. We didn't really get to see a lot of him. But in the trailers, there's scenes that we don't see of him. I think there's one where he like lifts the gun up and there's like planes flying over him. That could be in the director's cut. Or maybe he somehow survived to part 2, but I think he is dead. But I love that part as well. So I think that's some of my favourite like sequences from the film. And I've actually just realised I forgot like my main one. It's with the Bennis.
The Bennis, yeah.
The Griffin like creature on that planet. That reminded me so much
of Harry Potter.
Of Harry Potter, yes. But when I saw that film, when I saw the Bennis scene for the first time, I instantly thought, holy crap, Zack Snyder just can do first flight type sequences and do them like brilliant each time, because it really made me think of when Cavill's Superman flies for the first time. Only I think it was more expanded on because it was obviously the relationship with Tarak and stuff, and they both helped out each other and stuff, but just how it was done, genuinely beautiful. That is what I refer to as like when I said initially the movie had some of my favorite Snyder sequences. I think that is an all-time one for me.
That's like his auteur sort of.
It's just great.
It's just his style, isn't it?
Yeah, and when the Bennis knocked them off onto the cliff, and then I was like, oh shoot, here's where he's gonna run and jump and ride it. I was like, Zack has got the sauce, and he's showing it right now. I think that takes place in the second act.
It
so
does.
I think that's a good reason for the second act to actually be maybe underrated by
because
a
when
lot
they're
of people.
starting to like get these different people from the different Earths, not the Earths,
the different planets and moons and whatnot.
That's the part that I like when they started bringing everyone together.
That's
gave me that. That's where it echoed Zack Snyder's Justice League for me. That's why I loved it.
It did echo it a lot. I do think the team was sort of brought together better in Justice League.
I think they had the best introductions in these, though. I think everybody had a good introduction, except for me, probably Gmo's character. Don't really enjoy that one as much.
I did, especially the line about where he was like, "We're beyond redemption," and then Cora turns and like, "Then what about revenge?" And the music kicked in, and then he looked up. I did enjoy that. But we will touch on his character in a little bit. Or we can do it now because we've touched on Ray Fisher's. Great in the film. Unfortunately lacking in a bit of screen time and development. But still great. And I got to meet Ray Fisher after the screening of the film. He was awesome.
Amazing guy.
I told him, you were great, because he was. Didn't expect you to bite the dust. And he was just like, yeah. And just like giggled with me. It was great. As for Djimon's character,
General Titus.
Titus. I really dug Titus. Like,
Yeah.
a lot. And I know you had you've got a bit of an issue with the development of him.
I felt like, so everybody else had this badass introduction. Then General Titus is just this drunken guy that we just see on the floor.
I kind of like that though,
Yeah.
because I think that is especially for part 2, or even by the end of the third act, he does. I wouldn't say he gets that redemption, but he does sort of get that revenge, and
Yeah.
he goes from the fallen warrior to this new leader again.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that sort of contrast to his title compared to how he actually was. I think they made a reference to it in the film about like, oh, this is the great General Titus or whatever, and he's just some drunk guy on the floor like covered in rats or whatever.
That's sort of the thing that
I liked it.
I was like, I kind of wanted to feel a bit more of why he was this significant character, and I felt like
that's fair.
I do think he'll be explored a bit
We
more
definitely
in part
touched
2.
on it with the fact that he lost like pretty much all of his army.
Yeah.
And that will be touched on in part 2, which
100%.
I'll get into in a bit. But you aren't the only one who thinks Titus was sort of, I wouldn't say neglected, but like a big chunk of him is missing in the film.
Yeah, he's a bit undercooked.
Yeah, well, there's a scene, the introduction scene, where he's like, what about revenge? And then pretty much the next scene we see him in, he's got that, he's like fully shaved, fully clean, he's grown like a weird little goatee, he's got fully clean armor, he's like a different person in a way. I do think that is as a result of having to cut things to have this more streamlined cut.
Yeah, definitely.
And I didn't notice it at first until someone on Twitter, Toby, it was, you won't know him, but Toby, pointed it out. And I saw a few people in the comments sort of try to make up for why that is, but I was like, I get they're trying to make up, and I sort of get some of their points, but no, Toby's right. They does sort of just jump from this character to this character. He's new and improved without seeing we just needed a bit more on him.
Like he's got some octopus thing on his face when we first see him.
Yeah.
And then later on he's just got a fresh goatee and a fresh trim.
I don't know where he stopped off for that while Noble's like on his case with his little bat.
Yeah.
But I did really enjoy it. I did still.
I thought he was a good
him,
character, but I felt that there was more to explore with him. That was my.
I think we're gonna get that more in the director's cut and then in part 2. So I do think we're gonna get more of that.
Yeah, 100%.
So we agree, Cora, badass, like
badass,
great,
100%.
Absolutely great. Blood Axe, we liked. We just wish we saw more of.
Yeah.
And Titus, I liked a lot more, I think, than you do. But
I liked him, but I want to see more of him.
Yeah, I totally get it. We do. I think that's a good thing though.
Yeah.
Going into part 1 and wanting more, I think that's great, especially to set the stage for part 2. But I get that there is a difference sort of between wishing you actually got that more in this film, compared to wanting more for the next. So I kind of do think there is a bit of a difference, but I really enjoyed him.
Yeah.
Other characters to talk about. Tarak, I think I've said I love him.
Sick character.
That first fight, it's not even a first fight. Tarak and the Bennis like stole the show. Yeah. Did you notice the I wouldn't say cameo, it's more of a role in it. Who plays his own?
Ray Porter.
Ray Porter,
Dark
the legend himself,
Let's
Ray
go.
Porter, is in this film.
100%.
He did great.
He did great.
He's in a very minor role, but
yeah.
he was great. And then he got like, which we're definitely going to see a bloodier version of in the director's cut. But he basically got like his torso just like it just
the bird
ate
just
like
killed him.
a box of frosted shreddies or something.
Yeah.
But that was a really cool thing that I saw. There were a few other little cameos in that scene.
But I thought the actor did really well, Staz.
Because
he's
Staz,
not a very
known
known actor, but he came into this acting like an A-lister.
Staz, honestly, one of the best performances in the film.
Yeah.
He was great. I can't wait to see more of him in part 2, and I think if all goes well, this could launch him into that sort of stardom. I hope it does, because again, great. Like,
great actor.
Considering this was my first impression of him, what an impression to leave. And I'm sure a lot of other people are going to be thinking that as well. The line as well, to show them we're more than the shackles that bind us. It's like, that's when Zack is like cooking with that script.
That's what I loved about,
people
like,
are iffy on that sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I loved about like these characters. They all had their individual backstories, which keeps you intrigued. Like Staz's character, Tarak, he was chained up, and we're just thinking, shit, why is he chained
Yeah,
up like
well,
this?
we know he owes him,
Yeah.
like, I think it's like a decade or something, like a couple dozen decades or whatever.
So it's like they all come
service.
from their all individual experiences. Like Korra's a mysterious person from the mother world. Then we've got Tarek. He's a chained up, just a chained up.
He's a slave.
Yeah, he's a slave. Pretty much.
He's a slave because of what sounds like a very small mistake or mishap he made in his past. But I think that's something the film does really well. Is it does sort of fly through all these characters for sure.
Yeah.
But it also does give us parts of them to go off for this film so we can learn more in the next. Because I know a big part of part 2 is, I believe, sort of a reused idea from Justice League 2 that we never got to see. Basically, all the characters will be sitting around the campfire and they'll each be talking to each other in quite a heartfelt moment, going through their backstories, and that's where we'll see a lot more of it. Which is also where we could see like Ray Fisher again in flashbacks and stuff with his rebellion. So there is a lot more development to come. This is a part 1, and I think a lot of people are sort of forgetting that. I think if you can excuse Harry Potter doing even Star Wars itself for not giving you all the answers right away and all the developments and all this and all that, there's no reason why you shouldn't give Rebel Moon at least the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to sort of fill in these gaps and fill in these questions that we are wanting. Again, as you said, it left us wanting more, so we should let it give us more before we judge it for something it hasn't actually had the opportunity to do, because it's a part 1.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, the characters, for the most part, I liked. I don't think there was a character in the film I disliked.
Yeah.
Unless we're talking Noble, but we're meant to dislike him.
Yeah, he did his job.
I'm talking genuine. I just don't think they're all that well. I know some might feel iffy on some. I know you feel like on Titus.
Yeah.
But for me, there isn't one particular one that I'll pull out and be like, we should talk about Jimmy.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, plastered.
Killed it.
All over the marketing. Everywhere you go, you see Anthony Hopkins. He's in the film for 5 minutes.
He's the last voice of the trailer.
He's all over the marketing for this movie, barely in the film. And half of the scenes we see in the marketing, not in the film.
Yeah.
I get probably part 2 footage. I think it definitely is. I think he's going to have a much bigger story and awakening, as we did get sort of little parts of in this movie. But I loved Jimmy.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice to see more of him in this film. So he's one of those where instantly fell in love with him. Anthony Hopkins did a marvellous job, and the visual effects on him look great, and the performance behind
realistic.
It just great.
Yeah.
But definitely a character I want to see a lot more of, and I can't wait to. Which again we are going to, so I'm not trying to use that as a bash. Yeah. We are going to see a lot more. It's more so I'm just really excited to see more of Jimmy, considering how much he's been just everywhere for this film. He's like the icon aside from Korra.
What did you think of Michael's character?
Gunnar.
Yeah, Gunnar, yeah.
Loved Gunnar.
I loved
Gunnar.
I like that it kept because he was a bit more of like an isolated character within the group. Because
I mean, he got a man killed, and that was like that messed him up in that scene where MODOK's actor Corey Stoll dies because of him. That was like that messed him up.
And it was sort of an awakening.
It was an awakening, absolutely. Michael did a great job.
Yeah.
I genuinely love Gunnar. Again, he is one of those characters along with Korra and Jimmy that I did and Tarek that I did instantly connect with.
I like that he kept that separation between, because he was more of a human character.
Yeah.
So I like that he kept that separation between a simple farmer to these intergalactic space.
Absolutely. Noble used that to
warriors.
I don't want to say his advantage, but in the third act when they're all sort of hooked up, Noble used Gunnar to nearly kill Korra because I imagine he saw Gunnar as like, what the fuck are you gonna do, farmer? You know. But so I totally agree. I did like that. I think that's intentional. I do like the very clear disconnect.
Yeah.
Speaking of disconnects, Kai is a disconnect because he's not a rebel. He's an ass and a traitor.
Dickhead.
He's a dick.
Exactly.
What? And I, do you know what? A few weeks before the film, I was watching one of the trailers and I was like, nah, you're fishy. And then watching the film, I was like, no, I don't trust you actually anymore. I think you're a total ass.
All
and you're
bounty hunters are wrong.
Yeah, I thought you were going to mess everyone up. But then when he actually did it, it was like, I saw this coming. This should be hitting me as like, oh, of course, this is a trope. But it didn't. It was like, wow, well, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
Charlie Hunnam did great.
Incredible actor.
Have you heard the backstory about how he got Kai?
I've not seen it, no.
So how Charlie Hunnam got Kai was basically Zack asked him to audition for Rebel Moon, sent him a few characters, and like some of their lines and basically their arc over the film. And amongst that, he saw Kai, which wasn't on the table for him. He called Zack and was like, Zack, really dig these other characters that you've offered to me, but I'd really like this one that you haven't offered. Is it on the table? And as Zack was trying to explain about Kai, it was actually Charlie Hunnam twisted it and was just telling Zack about all these ideas he had for who Kai is, how he'd act, and all this stuff. So he basically took Kai from Zack and literally made him his own. And I think you can see that in the performance. He's great and he's having so much fun. He owns it. Yeah. He's having so much fun. So yeah, I totally agree. The more I think about it, the more I genuinely believe the characters, they are great. And but I can definitely see a lot of them do get undercooked a bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the ones that don't, I really do like. And just as a whole, I like them all. There's not one I dislike. I mean, even Kai, I don't like for the right reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the more I think about it, the more I do really like some of these characters. And Kai, he was great. Before we move on from characters, what do we think of Nemesis? We've talked about the Armada fight with her and how badass that was. But as a character, what do we think?
I think Nemesis is badass.
She was great.
I think she is a bit more of a quiet character and does have a troubled past, as we see from her talking about how she's lost her kids, all that.
Which we're going to see in part 2.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot in part 2.
We've seen a shot of her carrying a child through fire.
Yeah.
That's going to be dark.
I think the fact that she goes around slashing all these different villains, and she talks about how
there's a difference between justice and revenge.
Exactly, yeah.
Stuff.
So
she's more. It's like a vigilante in this world.
I forgot who it was. Was it Gunnar that said, "Oh, that was amazing"?
Yeah.
And then she reacted. She's like, "Oh, there's nothing to be happy about."
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of showed how it's something that she's lived through multiple times, and she's desensitized to it now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main thing that.
100%.
Yeah. That's like. It just shows how she's gone through this constantly and it's become a daily thing and she shouldn't enjoy killing.
Yeah. I think for Nemesis's arc, sort of by the end of this, it'd be nice if she's sort of got a happy-ish ending. I think that'd be kind of cool. Maybe not cool, but I think she kind of deserves this, even from what we've seen here. So, as for the main characters that we've seen on the posters and the main roster, we like them, even if we've got our own little nitpicks with each one here and there, right? Brilliant characters. Okay, so moving on from part 1, where would we like part 2 to go? What are our expectations? Where are they at right now? We have not seen a trailer just yet, by the way.
So for me, I'd say I want to see these characters a bit more developed. So I want to see
which I think
more
is a guarantee.
About.
So I think
so we've seen a lot of Korra's backstory. I want to see how General Titus's life was previously and how he was a ruler and what led to him losing all his army and his troops.
Yeah, the actual
100%
war that led to that. We've been told about it, but you want to see it now. Part 2 expectations for me, I think, as you said, I would like to see some more character arcs and character development fleshed out a little bit, like their backstories, which we are going to get in that campfire scene, and I'm 100%. Sure a lot more just sprinkled throughout the movie. I'd love it if we saw even more action, because I think one thing Rebel Moon Part 1 didn't have as much as I was expecting is that action, but it makes sense considering
it slowly got reeled in.
Yeah, it's setting up the team, so it does make sense. Whereas Part 2, and I think from the glimpses we've seen of it in the trailers, it is going to be a lot more action heavy and just full-on carnage, full-on Zack Snyder with 300 meeting Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and everything imaginable for his own story. So my expectations for Part 2 is sort of to just continue Part 1 and give me a real satisfying ending to this part of the story, at least, because let's be honest, there's a lot more to tell in this universe that I'm very excited to see. Quickly to talk about director's cuts, because there's been all sorts of controversy about this cut and why didn't he just drop this in the first place and whatever. What's your stance on that?
I'm, like, personally for me, because it's Netflix, it's a streaming platform that anybody could just pause, they could watch it the next day, they could go to the toilet, come back to it.
Which a lot of people like to conveniently forget about with streamers.
And because everybody's watching, like, series that are 6-7 hours long.
Yeah.
They should have released the director's cut, in my opinion. But I do think it was strategic as well.
Very much. I'm going to mention that. It was, like, clearly strategic. So here's what I think, which is basically I'm just going to read off what I summarized on Twitter just the other day because there was a lot of controversy about it. The real truth is this. Movies clocking in around or on the 2-hour mark are the best performers for Netflix. Definitely. We've seen it time and time again. I don't think that's really arguable. So both Snyder and them, meaning Netflix, want this to be huge. They're literal Star Wars, which they've been searching for since, I think, early 2016 at this point. And as such, they want to give it the biggest, best, and most logical launch and chance for it to be seen and talked about by as many as they possibly can. Dropping that 3.5-hour R-rated sci-fi epic like Rebel Moon would potentially turn away a lot of people, especially families, considering this is a Christmas release where it's one of the biggest movie watching times of the year. They're about to lose Stranger Things as their like attraction for the service. Rebel Moon could be their, I don't want to say it is going to be their new Stranger Things, but I think it's fair to say Netflix are desperate to find something to take on the throne after Stranger Things sort of departs. So as such, they need to build the series into something everyone feels welcome to. No one feels turned off or turned away before it's even gotten started. And that's sort of what I think about this. I think it's totally strategic. It's totally just to give this the best chance. I do think that maybe they should have just made a 2-hour 40 cut and put it
100%.
For part 2. I'd be fine if they went that route, if they sort of backtracked and if they went that route. But again, I understand both sides. I understand people, why didn't they just release the full cut? Why did they purposely put out a lesser version of the movie? Why did they this? Why did they that? Totally get it.
It's just a commercial standpoint, I think.
But there is that commercial standpoint and there is that strategic standpoint. So while I totally respect people feeling that, and I kind of do in a way agree with this is a bit of an odd strategy, the business side of me is like, no, this makes total sense. So that's sort of what I think about the director's cut. To talk about the reaction to the film, mainly critical, I think we can both agree there is very clearly a media bias against Zack Snyder a lot of the time. Not saying everyone, because not all critics are the same, but certain sites, certain people and publications have always shown this, and they only didn't really show it when Zack Snyder was pretty much the talk of the internet during Justice League. So from that, they obviously were, riding the success of him and capitalising on all the opportunities. Now that's died down, they're back to sort of being this hit and miss thing with Snyder.
It's just whatever gets views, to be fair.
Precisely. I think there's totally a bias against him, but I don't think that's everyone, and I think a lot of people are fully in their right to not like this film. But, I mean, Snyder fans know the type of people who are going to say, meh, and complain and cry. They know, so just want to cover that out the way. But anyway, have you got anything else to add?
I think we've covered a lot of it.
I think we've done a hell of a good job.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'm going to take this to you. What do you guys think of Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, streaming on Netflix December 22nd? Be sure to drop all that down below in the comments, and maybe we'll do this again for Part 2 in a couple months, because I've had a great time, to be honest.
Definitely.
This journey to Rebel Moon has been incredible. It's been some of the craziest moments of my life. It's presented some of the biggest opportunities of my life, and I'm really excited, really hyper about it, but I'm genuinely really sincere, really grateful for it. So thank you everyone for all the support, and thank you for joining me on this talk. It's been great.
It's great. Yeah, I've loved every part of Rebel Moon. Like, from the start, the rebuilding process, just the journey from the stills that we saw on Zack Snyder's Hero to the finished product.
It's been a great journey.
It's been a great journey.
It's been absolutely wild, and I'm never going to forget it because, again, this was my first, like, premiere. I got to meet Snyder, my favourite director. I got to meet you through this. I got to meet a lot of other friends.
Yeah.
It's been, like, surprisingly quite an emotional one. But anyway, guys, we are going to wrap it up here before we ramble on. Be a lot too much. Let me know, guys, what you think of the film down below. That would be great to hear, and I'll hopefully see you all in my next one. Take it easy, guys. Bye.